Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Welcome, friends. This is our second and final full day of this retreat. And so far, what you have been learning in this retreat are some of the reasons why we as Buddhists meditate, the understanding of where the Buddhist meditation comes from, and understanding the terms and all of these kind of things. And so today I wanted to shift the focus a little bit and talk to you guys more about a lot of the practicality of meditation, how you leave here, or how you leave the cushion and bring your meditation practice out into your life and actually have it become part of your life. The title of this talk that I've developed is called The Right Attitude of a Successful Meditator. A right attitude is not like a secret, ninth step of the Noble Eightfold Path or anything like that. This is something that I have put together upon examining my own many years of meditating and seeing what the Buddha talks about in the suttas. And so I wanted to talk to you about these things. So the first thing, I did want to talk about one Buddhist concept, and that is the concept of anusayas. These are underlying habitual tendencies. Buddha says that we have 7 underlying habitual tendencies. I'm not going to go into all of them, but the 2 important ones are greed and hatred. Bhante Sila, I believe, might have briefly talked about yesterday what's called the 3 roots of craving: greed, hatred, and delusion. So when we talk about greed, this is the mind that is the I-like mind. We have experiences through our senses that we like, that are pleasurable, that are something that we want to keep hold of, that we want to keep having. That's the mind of greed and covetousness. We want this, if we have something good, we want to hold on to it, and we don't want to let this go. Now the hatred is the I dislike mind. If the I like mind is the mind of attachment, the I dislike mind is the mind of aversion. I don't like this, get it away from me, push it away, I don't want to have anything to deal with it. And now the third part of greed, hatred, and delusion, the delusion, is the I am mind. Bhante spoke briefly about anatta, soullessness. The delusion is that we have this permanent being, this permanent soul. But that's a talk for a whole other retreat. We're not going to do too much into that. And so we understand that everybody who comes here, you're not all Buddhists. Most of you might not ever be Buddhist. But what I like to talk about greed and hatred is because it's something that whatever you believe, whatever you follow in your life, when you sit down and meditate, you'll be able to see these 2 things. You'll be able to see our modus operandi of we cling to and we want pleasurable, nice experiences, and we push away experiences we don't like. And when you begin to have insight after meditating and looking into your mind, you realize that that's actually the way we do this, which is usually on autopilot, is a huge cause of our own suffering. So, and this is something that you can see directly visible in your own practice. And so I wanted to talk about these 2 aspects, this attachment and aversion, because it's something that's important to keep in mind as I go through the rest of the talk. So to begin this talk about the right attitude of a successful meditator, I want to tell you guys a story. It's from the suttas. It's called Sona Sutta, S-O-N-A. And the story is about this monk named Sona. And the story starts, and he's really meditating. He's become a monk. He's like, I'm going to become awakened. And he's doing walking meditation all night and sitting and really putting lots of strenuous effort and activity into his practice. And they even says like his feet are bleeding and all these kind of things. And then one day he just realizes like, what the hell am I doing? Nothing's happening. I'm not getting any benefit from this. Maybe I'll just quit. And then the Buddha heard this, and the Buddha came up to him and he said, Sona, when you were a layperson, when you lived out in the world, were you skilled at playing the vina? The vina is an interesting ancient Indian instrument. It's kind of like a cross between a harp and a guitar. So it's a stringed instrument. And Sona says, yes, Bhante, yes, I was skilled at playing the vina. And so the Buddha said, when you were tuning your vina, if the strings were too lax, too loose, were they in tune and playable? And he says, no, Bhante. And those of you who have played guitar or any kind of strings instrument, you know what it is to have a loose string. You're not going to get any sound out of that. Or at least not any sound you want to hear with your own ears. So then the Buddha continues, as when your string was too tight when you were tuning your vina, was it in tune and playable? And he says, no, Bhante, no, it wasn't. And even so, if it was too tight, it could snap, it could break. So then the Buddha continues and he says, just so, a mind that is too tight, a restless mind, cannot help you in your practice. A mind that is too lax, a loose string, cannot help you. So the Buddha says to pick up your theme, find your theme, pick it up, and practice in that way. This is something that I hope as a meditator, especially in the beginning, that you keep in mind, because you can see in this story that there is a middle way, a middle ground to practicing. There is such a thing as practicing too much. And there also is such a thing as being lazy and not practicing enough. So the trick, the key is to find your theme. Find how you can practice the best for yourself. Because we're not all the same. You know, some of you might really like walking meditation, others maybe not. You know, each of our practices is very individual. So you have to, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, you have to be the one who can make that decision and take responsibility for your practice. And understand, and as you practice and as you become more mindful and aware of your mind and body, you'll be able to see, you'll be able to understand, I'm pushing myself too hard, or I'm not pushing myself hard enough. And that's when there's not going to be anybody around, behind you with a ruler or a whip whipping, oh, you better work harder. This is something that you're going to have to do as you become, a more advanced meditator. You take responsibility of your practice, and you make those decisions. There's no teacher that's going to be able to read your mind and say, you have to do this. But even though I talk about there being a balance, make no mistake, meditation is hard work. Now, if you look at all like in the media, mindfulness and stuff, it's a big business these days. There's all kinds of stuff in the media, and I've seen like advertisements, and it's always this woman on the beach, and she's all like this and smiling, and I look at that and I just laugh. because it's like I've every time I see something like that, there should be like a thought bubble, and then they should show you what the mind is like, right? Even you can look at even the monks. Some monks might look really nice and serene, but you don't know what's in their mind, So it's hard work. It's not easy, and it doesn't end until you're done. It doesn't end until you become an awakened being, really, because we're always going to have that greed and hatred. We're always going to have that like and dislike, and so it behooves us to be aware of that and to understand it. Of course, I know that the majority of you, are probably not thinking, I'm going to become an awakened being, right? You're coming to meditation for a variety of different reasons. And you've heard the benefits. One of the things that I've been doing a lot of lately is trying to learn more of the secular aspect of mindfulness and seeing that they have all kinds of studies and all these things. So meditation is bigger than it's ever been in the pop culture. So it helps to have a clear understanding, because there's a lot of stuff out there, a clear understanding of what the practice is about and what you can expect, both the good and the bad, from the practice. Because it's not going to be easy. We all have stuff in our past. When we sit down, it's going to come to our minds. It's just the way it is. This is everything. When we sit down, our whole life, we have done everything we can to not be alone with our minds. Everything we can. We distract ourselves. TV, video games, work, whatever it is, we distract ourselves. And then you come here, or you decide to sit down and try to meditate for the first time, and it's, whoa, I don't want to do this anymore. This is hard, or this brought up, feelings of things that happened in the past and these kind of things. So the first thing to understand is to expect that it's not going to be easy. I've been doing this for 12 years, and I can tell you it doesn't get easier. But what happens is, as you meditate, as you practice, you develop tools. You develop that wisdom, and those tools allow you to better handle any kind of situation that arises in your life, things that come up in your mind, all of these kind of things. And when you have these tools, and you have this understanding and the insight, in that regard it gets easier. But that doesn't mean that all of a sudden you are going to be that person who's I'm just going to sit, and anytime I sit, I'm going to be blissed out and happy, and everything's going to be great, and I'm going to have the best meditation. No. As soon as you attach to a meditation, this meditation is great. And then the next day you go back, I'm going to sit. And then it's the worst meditation you ever had. That's normal. That's completely natural. So this is something to understand, that it's hard. The Buddha, when he talks about his meditators, and a lot of times you'll hear monks or bhikkhus, and it's an important thing to know that when the Buddha is talking to people, he's talking to what's called the Fourfold Assembly. The Fourfold Assembly are the key to the thriving of Buddhism. And that Fourfold Assembly is this: male and female lay people, male and female monastics. And in the time of the Buddha, this Fourfold Assembly was thriving. Not only male and female monastics who practiced and went into the woods and did all these kind of things, but also male and female lay people. There are lay people who attained all kinds of sotapanna and all these, kinds of these levels of enlightenment. So this is a practice for everybody. Everybody can do this practice. And so the Buddha, no matter who's doing the practice, he praises three things. He says, when he talks about a meditator who's really doing the practice, the best, he talks about three words: diligent, ardent, and resolute. So when the Buddha talks about diligence, the Buddha says that all wholesome, all skillful actions, all skillful activity actually stem from diligence. What does that say? If you're mindful, right? If you, in all the situations in your life, if you're going through life on autopilot, just following your whims, not even thinking about it, having no mindfulness, you're bound to have all kinds of, issues and not paying attention to things and, getting people mad at you and all these kind of things. When you're mindful and aware, you're heedful of your life and what's going on, then you can know, you can see what is the best thing I can do in this situation and, do that accordingly. So diligence is very important. And the Buddha's definition of diligence actually is the consistent but balanced effort in guarding your mind from unskillful mind states. Let me talk briefly about skillful and unskillful, wholesome and unwholesome. There's a Pali word, it's called kusala, which means skillful, wholesome. Akusala, which means unskillful, unwholesome. Simply what that means is, because it's something I say a lot, so for you guys who don't know, I want to make sure you understand what I'm talking about. A skillful action of thought, word, and deed is simply an action that is beneficial to you and beneficial to others. That's it. An unskillful action, an unwholesome action is an action of thought, word, and deed that is unskillful, harmful to you, and harmful to others. So as meditators, one of the great things about becoming a meditator and developing insight is you see with your own experience, wow, I did this, and this was the result, and that was crappy. I don't want to do that again. Why am I doing this? Right? And so naturally, as you develop your insight, you naturally want to live a better life that's more skillful for yourself and others. And so that's why diligence is so important. And so what is ardent? Ardent is intensely devoted. And at the beginning, there's you might not have a lot of devotion to your practice, or maybe I'll do a little bit here, a little bit here. But as the ball gets rolling and you see the benefits of it, you just want to do it more and more, and you become devoted. It becomes part of your life. And resolute, it's firm in purpose. Like, this is now part of my life. I am resolute in meditating, resolute in trying to do my best every day in every situation to act as mindful and as wise as I can. So I want to go over briefly about the qualities. So what kind of qualities do you need to be a successful meditator? First one is discipline. Why do you need discipline? You need discipline for those days that your mind is going to say, you don't need to meditate. You worked hard. This meditation stuff, don't bother with it. And that's going to happen all the time. It happens to me still almost every night when I'm meditating here. It's a long day and my mind's like, don't meditate. Just go to your room. Enjoy life. It's okay. Yeah, no. So that's when you have to say, those are times when you realize, okay, you have to be, disciplined. You have to be tough on yourself to do these things. You need determination. Because, again, this is a hard practice. You're not necessarily going to see, I meditated for a month and now everything's so wonderful and I want to do this and have it be part of your life forever. It takes quite a while for you to see real strong benefits to the meditation practice. And the reason being is because they're hard to see. When you are meditating for a time and then you look back at yourself, maybe a year ago, right? And then you say, wow, I've come far. I've changed. I was in this situation and I handled it a lot better than I did or I would have a year ago. That's how you know that the practice is helping you, that the practice is benefiting you, and that you are progressing in it. In the beginning, it might just be that you develop you're happy that you found a place and a time for you to go and be in quiet for 5 or 10 minutes. right? And that actually in itself is just a very nice habit that you develop. So also persistence, same reason, because of the determination. This is a practice that you have to continuously do and be persistent in. With all the ups and downs. You're going to have ups and downs, even years in. If you become a long-term, lifelong meditator, even if you meditated for 8 years, there's gonna come a time where there's gonna be a whole week where you just don't want to meditate, and you don't meditate. But if you've developed a habit enough, you start to feel guilty, and you start to feel, I should go back to my meditation because it's helped me and done so much for me. Why am I doing this? So, in the end, what a meditator needs is what's called true grit. That's a mental toughness, the ability to really sit and to be with things that we don't want to deal with, in our own mind and also our experiences in the world. And so, now it sounds like we're ready to, join the military. We're tough, we're disciplined, we're ready to go. That's only half of what a meditator needs to be successful. They also need self-compassion. There are times where you are going to be very critical of yourself, very judgmental. You need that compassion to help you realize that you're not a perfect being, that you're on this path, that you're practicing, that you're trying to develop yourself day by day. And you make mistakes. You're going to be stupid. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to do unskillful things. It happens. That's life. That's part of being a human being. And so you don't become so hard on yourself. You develop that compassion. So self-compassion is extremely important. Another thing is self-confidence. Self-confidence is also very important because you're not going to get very far in the practice if you're always having a lot of doubts about yourself or the practice. Like, I can't do this, I really suck, all these kind of things. That's going to be a hindrance to your practice. So really the self-confidence is something that's important, and that will be a very big benefit to your practice. Another is open-mindedness. Being open-minded, I can't underscore how important being open-minded is in this practice. Because you're going to see things, if you develop this practice, no matter what kind of meditation you're doing, whether you're a Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, whatever, you're going to start to see things in your experience that are not going to be pleasant, and that are going to make you question everything that you hold dear, even the fact that you think that you have this permanent self. And so if you come into meditation, you're very closed-minded. You know all the answers. I don't believe in any of this. I know everything. It's not going to help you. It's going to hurt you. As a matter of fact, one of the things I've been reading a lot lately, like I said, I was reading a lot about the secular mindfulness and things. There's all kinds of articles coming out now about people's having the negative experiences with meditation, having mental breaks and all these kind of things, right? It's not easy to meditate because these things are going to pop up in our mind, things that are going to question. And so if you have an open mind that I don't know, no expectations. Whatever is coming up in my experience is coming up in my experience. Of course, I'm going to judge that experience based on the framework that I have, whether Buddhist, Christian, atheist, whatever. You're going to have, judge those experiences based on your framework. But it's good to keep an open mind for your practice. It's very important in that regard. Also, to go along with the open-mindedness and the self-confidence is the ability to experiment, not being afraid to experiment. You come here and, Bhante Sila, we teach you one thing. You go to another place, they're going to teach you something different. You go to another place, they're going to teach you something different. So there's a lot of ways of doing things. And the ultimate judge as to whether that practice, that way works for you, is you in your own experience, in your own practice. I'll give you an example, like the way that Bhante Sila taught you guys walking meditation. You might notice that doesn't work for me. I walk normal pace. That's just the way it is, right? I know what works for me, and I practice. And if I learn something new, which is, oh, this is a new way I've never heard before, okay, I'm going to try it out. I'll be open-minded about it, and I'll experiment and test it out. And if it works for me, I'll take it on my practice. If it doesn't, I'll put it aside. So each of us is very individual in that regard. So it's important to be able to experiment. And it's also important to be able to question. And that goes along with the open-mindedness too. Because like I said, just the meditation experience itself is going to bring up things that are going to cause you to question. And to be able to be comfortable with that is important. Because that will allow you to develop the practice in a way that's going to be beneficial for yourself. And so all of these are qualities that are important for a successful meditator. But the good news is, some of you might be like, oh man, I don't have all these qualities. It's okay. I didn't have all these qualities either when I started meditating. The good news is that the practice develops these qualities as well. So, because as things start to work, there's less doubts. Your confidence rises. All of these things click. You develop the compassion, because you realize, well, why am I being so hard and stupid on myself? All of these things are part of what happens as you develop the practice. And so it's important to understand these qualities. And also, in the end, it's also important to keep things light, to have fun. Because the meditation practice is going to be hard. It is. There's no doubt about it. But that doesn't mean that you can't, what I like to say, make it an adventure, because it really is. Right? We grew up with all kinds of fairy stories and things, like people go out on grand adventures and things like that. They go out into the world, they face the world and all these kind of things. Very rarely is a story about going in and facing the world inside. So that's what this is. When you sit down to meditate, you are beginning an adventure. And you have no clue where that adventure is going to lead you. Because when you sit down to meditate, each time it's like a fresh experience. You don't know what's going to happen. All of a sudden something happens and wow, this is amazing. I've never had this much peace. Or something happens, a memory comes up in your mind that you thought you forgot from when you were a child, and that brings up all kinds of sadness and these kind of things. You just never know what's going to happen. So it's important I think it's important to understand it in that framework. When you look at your mind, right? When you think about like dark dungeons and things like that, what are in like dark places, like under the bed, in the woods at night, all these things? Monsters, right? Creatures, things that can harm us, things that can hurt us. But what else is there usually in these stories? What else is in the darkness? What else is behind the things that we fear most? Treasure. You never know what is out there. So when you sometimes to face your fears and to deal with the deepest, scariest things, you come out of that with something that you never thought you could have. And it just changes your life and it makes everything better. So it's important to understand that, I think, to understand, to make it, and it also helps to, because sometimes the practice can become, we can get into a monotonous aspect of it. We think, oh, okay, well, it's just something I do. It's, 4 o'clock this, 5 o'clock that, 6 o'clock I sit down and meditate. And then, okay, I checked it off my habit, trainer or whatever. That, we don't want that to happen to our practice. Because it is something that it can be something that's amazing. It can be something that's so life-changing and so beneficial that it literally just becomes part of who you are and what you do. And that's important. It's okay to smile. Normally when we think of even Buddhist monks, we think Buddhist monks are supposed to be like, smile. Because what I found is actually when you start to understand your mind, when you start to look at your mind, there is no better form of entertainment than your mind. Your mind will do and say the stupidest, silliest, ridiculous things. And when you see that, you're like, oh, okay, well, I can really be afraid of that, and I can take it personal, like, oh man, I can't believe I thought that. Or I can laugh. I'll tell you a quick story that I don't mind telling people. Probably about 5 years ago, and I was here where you guys are. I was at a metta retreat with Bhante Silananda, and he was doing the guided meditation, may you be well, happy, and peaceful. And my guided meditations don't do well for me. Actually, back then they brought up aversion. So I'm meditating and I'm trying to meditate and I'm hearing Bhante Sila's voice and I get a verse, and all of a sudden in my mind comes this vision of me getting up, coming up to Bhante Sila and punching him in the face. And I thought to myself, you know what? The average person, if they thought that, they would feel so horrified. Oh my God, I can't believe, I'm so horrible. I'm such a horrible person that I thought that. But I had been practicing for enough years and understanding my mind to enough point where you know what happened? I had to stop myself from bursting out laughing hysterically in the meditation hall. Because I saw that. And I didn't take it personal. It's just, it came on my mind and I laughed. As simple as that. That's what I mean by laughing, taking things too personally is going to makes things worse. It really does. And that's one of the great things about this practice is that it allows you to see something like that thought that arises. And you realize, okay, came up, but you know what? I don't have to accept it as I don't have to, it's a thought that came up. I don't have to follow it. I don't have to believe in it. And I was just listening to a psychologist. He was talking about that, which is interesting. He's not a Buddhist, but he was talking about Carl Jung, actually, Jung was talking about the way he described it as the unconscious thoughts that arise come from your unconscious, and then you don't have to accept them or believe that they're true. And I was like, that's exactly what I experienced, in my own practice. Because the thoughts that arise, and you say, okay, well, if I follow that thought, things are not going to go well. So I'm not going to follow it. Simple as that. That's when you start to get the power to be able to choose. That's important. So definitely it's important to not take yourself too seriously. It's also important not to be so hard on yourself. This is where that self-compassion comes in. When you start to practice, I know for myself personally, people ask me, what's the one thing that you noticed that has changed the most since you started practicing? And the one thing for me is that I've dropped, not completely, because I'm not an awakened being yet, but I've dropped in a large amount, I've dropped self-criticism and self-judgment. I was extremely harsh on myself, extremely critical of myself for most of my life. And that even was part of me quitting meditation in the beginning. Because meditation, I thought I was supposed to do it this way. You follow the instructions. I couldn't do any of the instructions. I got so negative and I couldn't stand. And I was like, you suck. You're a horrible meditator. And I could see that it was actually hurting my mind, so I quit. So this is the downside of having this mind that is so critical and so judgmental. Right? When you start to meditate and you start to see that and you start to see what that's doing to you, you just gradually, why am I doing this to myself? This is ridiculous. And then you know what happens when you stop judging yourself too much and you start being so critical about yourself? You stop being judgmental and critical about others as well. Because when you start to understand your mind and see into your mind, you understand people. You understand how others are. We all have different proclivities and we all like different things and stuff like that. But really deep down, all of our minds are pretty much the same. In Buddhism, we would say all our minds have greed, hatred, and delusion. That's where a lot of our actions stem from: greed, hatred, and delusion. As a matter of fact, an awakened being, the definition for nibbana is the abandoning of greed, hatred, and delusion. An awakened being has no more greed, hatred, and delusion. So, when we understand ourselves, we understand others. It's as simple as that. And so I noticed the same, and I didn't realize how critical and judgmental I was of other people until I started lessening my own criticism and my own self-judgment. And so, and all of us have this to some degree or another. I mean, I can't, say mine was worse or better than anybody else's, but we all have it. It's all part of the I like and the I dislike mind. It's as simple as that. So, it's also important to forgive yourself. There's so many times where I have to just realize, just remind myself, positive self-talk, it works. It sounds really corny and stupid, but I'm telling you, it works. And the interesting thing about it is, the more you get it, the more you develop your practice, the more you become your own best friend, the positive self-talk doesn't sound corny and stupid anymore. It actually sounds like you're talking to your best friend. So it's important to be able to forgive yourself. Sometimes I have to say, if anger comes up or I do something stupid, I just have to say, well, I'm just not there yet. I'm doing the best I can, I'm practicing, but I'm not there. And so I'm talking too much, so I have to actually start moving a little bit faster if I want to get through everything I want to get through. So, making the practice your own. As I was saying before, it is important to take responsibility for your own practice. You can't give somebody agency for your own practice. Even in Buddhism, the Buddha can't bring you to awakening. The Buddha, even he said, the Buddhas don't bring you, they can't make you awaken. They can only show you the way. So the Buddhas are going like this. Okay, if you want to do this, you follow this path. And so you have to bring your own self down that path. Nobody can do that for you. So if you want to do this practice and you want to do, to progress, you have to take responsibility for that. Because if you don't, well then it's not going to get anywhere. Because you'll always be relying, oh, this is a great teacher. They're the best. And then something happens, I don't like that teacher anymore. I'm going to go to this teacher. I'm going to go to that teacher. I'm going to go to this teacher. Because you're expecting that somebody else is going to give you something that only you can see in your own mind, in your own experience. Now, it's important to have what in Buddhism we call a kalyana mitta. That's a spiritual friend. This is a person who supports your practice. They don't even have to. One of my kalyana mittas is my best friend from lay life. He followed me. He saw when I became a Buddhist and a practitioner and all that stuff. He might become a monk. I don't know yet, but throughout that, he wasn't a Buddhist, he wasn't a practitioner, but he supported me that I did this practice. That I was trying to make myself better and do all these things. That's what a good spiritual friend is. Bhante Ji is a kalyana mitta to us here. Bhante Ji doesn't tell us, you must do this, you must do that. He's not, taskmastering us all over. He leaves us alone to do our own practice, but we know he's there if we need him, if we need his guidance. So I like to think of a kalyana mitta as like you're on a long journey and like there's scouts ahead of you, right? And so to know a little bit, understand a little bit of what's ahead of you, that's what the scout is for, a ranger, whatever, somebody who's ahead, somebody who's a little bit further down the path than you, or a lot further down the path than you, who can help you on your own practice, in your own path. You still have to walk that path yourself, but you can still have help. You're not alone. So it's important to definitely have those kind of people. And you'll see as you practice, there's going to be people who will just drag you down. And you realize for your own benefit, and even for their benefit, that you have to let them go. Because they're just making your life worse. And you want to be around, you naturally just gravitate to be around people who are doing the same kind of thing, living the same kind of way. It's just how it goes. So, again, as I said before, you can't be afraid to try new things, personalize the practice. Like with the metta, first I learned metta over the internet because back in, for almost a decade as a practitioner, I was the only Buddhist I knew in my own daily life until I came to live here, basically. So a lot of the stuff I learned from was on the internet. And so I learned how to do metta from the internet. And then I came here and I learned how to do metta from Bhante Sila and Bhante Ji. And, then I practice, and some of the things that they taught me I still do. Some of the wordings that they taught me I still do. Some of the wordings I've made my own wordings. I don't teach metta the same way that they teach metta. It's the same core, but the wordings are different, the visuals are different, these kind of things. And so that's why it's perfectly fine, and it's good for you to be able to personalize your practice, because what works for me is not necessarily going to work for you. So you can, for instance, we very much tried to follow the oldest text from Buddhism here. So for me, what works is, as long as it works with the oldest teachings that we know of, and it fits that in my own experience, and I can, it's not deviating from that, or it's not making my practice worse, and it's beneficial, then I do it. So it's important, this is all, a lot of times people don't even realize, I can do that. I can take responsibility for my own practice? Wow, that's really cool. But see, that's the important thing, because the only person who is going to be able to be there to analyze your own experience is you. No, nobody else. So it's also important, especially if you're searching, there's a huge amount of paths, even if you're just looking in Buddhism, there's, like I said, Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana. Within Mahayana, there's Zen and this. There's dozens and dozens of types of Buddhism. There's dozens and dozens of meditations from all over the world. There's a marketplace out there. And so it's very easy to get confused and to get lost in these kind of things. It's confusion of choices. Sometimes it's just easier to not have that too many choices. When we have so many choices, we have so much doubt and confusion. But the important thing that I've always done is I follow my own intuition. I follow my own, what I consider, I guess, my own, intuition. But the important thing is, what I realized was, for you to trust your own intuition, you have to start being truthful with yourself and stop lying to yourself. And what do I mean by that? We fool ourselves all the time. It's very easy to fool ourselves. For instance, I can remember being young and a lot of people coming to me for advice. I don't know why, but it just happened that way. I'm talking in my teens, early 20s, college, and these kind of things. And one of the things I realized from that is never give advice. It's really bad giving it. Giving advice is dangerous. But what I realized from that experience over those years was people know what they need to do. They really do. But they feel like they need somebody else to give them validity or these kind of things. If you really look at yourself, really ask yourself a question, you'll get an honest answer. We might not want to take that honest answer, but if you really do that, in my experience, if you stop, if you be honest with yourself, make sure that you're not fooling yourself, then when your intuition comes and your intuition says, do this, then you can trust, okay, you know what, I'm going to do this. And so for me, that's what has gradually led me down the path that I am now, that I'm on. And it will continue to lead me down that path. We can't know what's in the future. And we can't know what's tomorrow, let alone 5-10 years from now. But it's been my experience, especially with the meditation practice, following your intuition, being truthful to yourself, making sure that you're not fooling yourself, not lying to yourself, will be a good guide for your practice. So now I want to talk about how we can make our practice part of our daily life, incorporating it into our life. The first thing we need to do is, if you want to develop this practice is to make it consistent. That's the number one thing, the absolute number one thing. Because what I always say is, when you hear people, I hear it all the time, monks, lay people, teachers, anybody, what they say, what they ask for, people ask, how often should I meditate? And people say, a half hour in the morning, a half hour at night, right? And for me, that didn't work. It never worked, ever. But, so, what I would say is, what I would say is, it's better that you did 5 minutes every day than an hour twice a week. So for me, in my own experience, and the advice, I guess I am giving advice, that when I talk to people about meditation, especially in the beginning, don't worry about time. Don't be like, oh, I have to sit, am I here for a half hour? Oh man, I don't want to get up all day. Don't worry about time. Do not worry about time. The best thing to do is find a place and a time that you can sit, and for however long you feel like you can sit, your mind and body, sit. When you're done, you're done. And you do it again the next day after that, the next day after that. And that might even start out, like I told you guys about how I quit meditation, right? I came back and I was like, I'm going to sit, and however long my mind and body tell me, okay, when I'm done, I'm done. And at the beginning, that was like 3 minutes, literally 3 minutes. And that 10 years later has turned into this. Now that doesn't mean you're going to become a monk if you meditate for 10 years, but it's like, like the story of the snowball rolling downhill, right? It builds up steam. As you're doing it, you're not worried about, you're not being judgmental. Oh, I didn't meditate for a half hour today, all these kind of things, and you're getting down on yourself. You sit down, you meditate. When you're done, you're done. You're not pushing yourself, you're not being too hard on yourself, because that's really bad in the beginning. When you're done, you're done. The next day, same thing. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And you know what you will find out? It's a habit. You do it for a couple months, it becomes a habit. And then you know what happens? When you this is a pleasant, I like this time. If anything, at least I get away from the kids and spouse or whatever. I get away from my coworkers. I can be in this time and be peaceful. And then you want to do it more because it becomes a priority. Once it becomes a priority, you never have to worry about not wanting to do it ever again. You'll go up in those cycles, but once it becomes part of your life, once it becomes a priority, you will want to do it, and you'll want to do it longer. So the 3 minutes, and then a year or two later, you're like a half hour every day, a half hour morning. Maybe I'll do an hour in the morning, an hour at night, or maybe not. So. In general, though, I would say don't worry about time. Just do the most that you can. Do what you feel is appropriate for you, especially in the beginning, and then follow your intuition as time goes by. The longer you do it, after years and years, and you will want to do it longer periods of time, and come to do 7-day retreats or even longer retreats, these kind of things. But in the beginning, be kind to yourself. Make it a habit first, and from that habit, the time when it becomes a priority, it'll just grow. So consistency is important to make it a priority. So, what do we do? What kind of things can we do to develop our practice at home? One of the most important things is to see if you can get your partners, or if you have children or whatever, see if you can get them involved in it. Or if they're not going to be involved in it, at least that they understand that you have set this barrier, that you have set this time and place, that this is the time I'm going to meditate. Of course, that's not going to work for like a dog or a cat or a 3-year-old child. They're just going to come and bust in anyway. but you can use that as part of your meditation. So, but it's important to, if you can, to get whoever you live with, get them involved in it, because that makes your practice easier. And also, it's beneficial. Now that doesn't mean that you try to like forcibly convert somebody. You must meditate or anything like that. Please don't do that. No, don't do that. Because that just makes things worse. But if they want to be involved, that's good, because it helps you in your own practice, or at the very least that they understand this is what I'm doing. So please, do your best not to, to allow me to have this time to myself. That's really the most important thing if you're going to try to meditate at home. And then, of course, having a place that's quiet, kind of away, maybe like a closet or something. Somewhere, some place that, where you can go away and be by yourself. Doesn't have to be quiet. We try, especially in the beginning, we're always trying to go after, it needs to be quiet, because if there's a sound, then my meditation's ruined. The more you do it, the more you realize that the sound is your meditation. It's important to understand that. But at least in the beginning, try to have that, try to find a place that you can go to, that you can get away and start your meditation. And if you can get your family involved, like I taught my nephew when he was 4 to meditate. I used him as a guinea pig pretty much. And that worked for like 4 or 5. He would meditate or try to anyway. And then by the time he was 6 or 7, he said, I'm going to go play Xbox instead. So that pretty much ended that. But even still, you can work with there's things out there like teaching your children to meditate and these kind of things. So it's good if you can get your family involved and make it a family time. The family, we do this every day or whatever. This is our time to meditate, or our time to sit quietly, whatever it is. It's a good thing to have for your family. At work, it's good to, if you can, even develop your practice at work. If you have a break, do some walking meditation. If you have time at your desk or whatever you're doing, take the time. There's a really cool tip that I first learned here, and basically what it is as you're going through your day, the last minute of every hour, you take that last minute, you stop what you're doing, and you just follow your breath for 60 seconds. And so if you do that, by the end of the day, you have like 15 minutes of meditation right there. Okay? But that's an awesome thing, because what it does is it develops your mindfulness. Because mindfulness in Buddhism is not just about being focused on something. It's also recollecting that you want to be focused on something. So as you do that, you develop, and then you look at the time. Oh, it's time to do my minute. And so you're building up your mindfulness, and that is making it become part of your life, because then no matter what you're doing, no matter what situation you're at, if you're driving, if you're at a meeting, whatever you're doing, you can say, oh, okay, it's time for me I can use this time, be mindful, be aware. And so it's also important to have, we get caught up in our own lives and busy and all these kind of things. It's important to get away every once in a while. If you become a meditator and this is something you do, if you have a group of people you meditate with, or if you come to bhavana, every 4 or 5 months or whatever, it's very important to get away, to be around people who are meditating and these kind of things, kind of revitalize your batteries, and then you can go back out. So if you have a community or people, meditators around you, that's a good thing to have, because it'll help you continue the practice. If not, you can go to a monastery or go to places. You can come here just to hang out for the weekend. You can work with us and we'll talk to you and all that kind of stuff. We're not always in silent meditation retreat. We do hours of meditation a day, but we still have to do lots of work and all these kind of things. Like all the work that you guys have been doing, that we do at that work when you guys are not here. So that's part of life here at the monastery. So Also, there's a lot of resources related to meditation online. I probably don't need to tell you guys that. You probably found out about us from online from Google or somebody else, or you went on our website to register, so you know that. So briefly, I wanted to talk about, before I close out, how we develop our meditation practice off the cushion. There's a simile that came to my mind. It's called the ember simile. And ancient times, our ancestors, before we lived in towns and all these kind of things, when we were nomadic, we'd have a fire in the morning, and maybe we had to travel 20, 30 miles. They developed the ability to take an ember from this fire, and they carried it in an ember case throughout the day, and they kept that ember alive. And so when they stopped for the night, they put their kindling together, put the ember out, they blew on the ember, and the fire came back. So they kept an ember alive throughout the whole day, throughout all their travels, weather, whatever, and it came back. And so this is something important to understand with your practice. I talked to you guys briefly about this with the mindfulness of eating. Meditation is not just about being on the cushion. If it's just on the cushion, if it's just something that you do 3 to 4 o'clock every day, you'll see benefits to it, but you're not going to be able to see the full benefit. You're not going to be able to carry that ember throughout the whole day. When we make the practice part of our life, so that we're mindful this is something we want to do no matter what we're doing, then we're keeping that ember alive. And it's important I don't have enough time to go over this because I went a little bit over than I thought I would, but I'm going to post it on the board. The 4 foundations of mindfulness, like Bhante Sila said. 4 foundations of mindfulness is the Buddha's toolbox for how you develop your awareness and your mindfulness no matter what you're doing. No matter sitting, standing, walking, working, driving, whatever. You're focusing on these foundations of mindfulness. The first one is your body. And so there's various aspects, various techniques and contemplations that go with each one of these. I don't have time to go over them. But you're examining, okay, your body. I have this body. What's going on in this body? Okay? Then you're examining your feeling. Feeling is painful feeling, pleasurable feeling, neutral feeling. An itch, is that painful or pleasurable? Right? A pain. I have a painful feeling. What is this painful feeling? Right? So you are literally, like a scientist would take a microscope and start examining. You are being with your psychophysical experience. Because the next one is your mind. Is your mind full of attachment, aversion? What are the thoughts arising in your mind? All of these things. And so you can do that no matter what you're doing. Stuck in traffic. You're driving, somebody cuts you off. Now's the time. What's going on? What's going on with your body? What feelings have arisen? What is going on in your mind? What thoughts are arising? You can see all of that happening. The more you practice that, you see it, it's like real time. This person does this, anger arises in your mind. You can make the decision, I don't need to follow that anger. Or you didn't catch it enough and you start giving the middle finger or whatever, and then afterwards you examine, I probably shouldn't have done that, right? So that is, that's really a very brief explanation of practicing these 4 foundations of mindfulness. You're examining what is happening in your experience with your body, your feeling, and your mind. These 3 things. So a sound. Sound, what's going on with your ear? That's examining that. What's going on with the smell? Taste, touch, all of these things. What does your butt feel like on the cushion? What does it feel like when you're sweating? What does it feel like the air, you get a nice breeze from the fans? All of that. That is practicing satipatthana. That's practicing mindfulness and clear comprehension. And so you're using all of these frameworks to examine your experience. And you can do that no matter what you're doing. I've done it, maybe if you read my bio, I did child protective services. I've been in some crazy emergency situations. I've been in emergency situations where I remember to breathe, right? I stopped and I was able to breathe. I could see, even though I was dealing with all kinds of stuff going on, I was still aware of what's going on in my mind, the thoughts that are arising, all of this. That's the power and the benefit of developing this practice. And then once you are aware of that, and you're paying attention to what's going on, what people are saying, what's going on around you, then you can realize what is the best thing for you to say, the best thing for you to do in that situation. Because you're fully aware, fully mindful of that situation. So that's the power, that's the importance of developing this. It's not just something, you can do that while you're on the cushion. But the importance, the way the practice really explodes is when you do that no matter what you're doing. If you develop it, you remind yourself, you have the sati, which is the Buddhist term for mindfulness. You have the recollection that, okay, I'm sitting in the car and I'm in traffic. I could spend, 40 minutes bitching and complaining about the world and politics and these traffic and this people and this or that. Or I can pay attention to what's going on. Now all of that bitching and complaining might still come up, but you're becoming, instead of personalizing it, you're becoming the person, you're becoming what is aware of that. You are being aware of it. And so when you become aware of it, it loses its power over you. You gain a choice to allow that to become wrapped up in that mind state, or to just let it go. And oftentimes when you are able to be aware of something, and you say to yourself, I'm not attaching to that, I'm letting it go, it actually will go away. That's not every time, but you'll be surprised how often that's all you need to do, is to just be aware, and how things will be different. And so, in the end, as I was saying, you always have a choice. You don't realize it, but mindfulness, meditation, allows us to see that choice, because it gives us the time to make it. When we have the time to make the choice, we can choose to make better choices. We can choose to do things that are not only beneficial to ourselves, but beneficial to others. We might do things, like I want to help this person out of compassion or whatever. You might have good intentions, but you don't have the wisdom, the insight to see that what you're about to do might actually be harmful, right? So there is such a thing as, you can do things with good intentions, but it still can be a harmful thing. It could still be an unbeneficial thing. So when we have the compassion and the understanding together with the insight and the wisdom, then, we become a force in the world. It's an amazing thing to be able to, because that's how you change the world, really. You don't change the world by overthrowing governments and going out there with signs and all these kind of things. You change the world by changing yourself, and in doing so, you see the power of that as the world changes around you. How you benefit the people around you, and how that really, it's like a domino effect. It just spreads out. And so really the power of this practice is that. The power of this practice is the ability to change yourself and change the world around you. And you start that simply by following your breath. Pretty easy place to start. So I think that's about it for me, friends. So we'll end there. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.